Hello and welcome to my new video, how to draw the Capitol building. The first step in this drawing is to draw a vertical line on the far left and then a short diagonal line at the top of this vertical line going to the left and then a longer diagonal line going to the right. And now just with these three lines we've already drawn the basic shape and all of the other shapes that are part of this complicated building will be related to this basic rectangle that we've got. So the next thing to do is to draw a couple more vertical lines and then the diagonal line, which will be sort of parallel to the diagonal line on the right, to create the top of this new rectangle that's sort of coming out a little bit forward to the first rectangle. And so each long diagonal will be going towards the right. This rectangle will need a triangle on its top. And then the next stage is to really repeat in a similar vein the shape, this sort of shallow rectangle with a triangle on its top. But also, I think for the picture to work, it needs to be a bit lower. So if you look at the top of this shallow rectangle, it's not the same height on the diagonal as the nearer one on the left. So the shape is repeated, but the one on the right is a bit lower down. So once you feel that you've got that roughly in place, then it's time to think about how we're going to put the dome onto the Capitol. And so to draw the dome on the Capitol, we need to find the furthest line to the right, a vertical line, and then draw an ellipse, a circle on its side. And I tend to draw the whole ellipse. I'm just using a pencil for this early stage of this drawing. So if you draw the whole ellipse, the front and the back of the ellipse, this sort of squashed circle on its side, then you can find the angle of it much better and the curve of it, rather than just trying to do the front of the ellipse, the bit that we can see. And then we'll need other ellipses above it to create the sort of stacked wedding cake sort of effect that the dome has. And so once we've drawn the dome shape, which sort of sits on top of these ellipses and a little bit of the detail towards the top, we don't want to put any real detail in at this stage because we're still blocking out the basic shapes. We'll come forward again to the foreground and try and work out how these blocks relate to each other. So the blocks that we're drawing, these very simple shapes where the diagonals go towards the right or the left and the verticals stay upright. It's always a nice stage in drawing where I start to make connections about shapes, how they relate to each other, how if one area is higher or lower than another, or if it's like a continuation of a line which sort of disappears and then pops up again at the same height as it was before, because the two shapes are parallel in real life and the same height. So in the drawing, the tops of them will be along the same diagonal line, and oftentimes even when you look at a building for a long time, you still make connections which I don't see straight away, and I always find that satisfying to make more connections about these fundamental basic shapes first before we get into any of the details. So although it is tempting to put in the details at an early stage, it's never really such a good idea, particularly if you're using a pencil first, because we can rub these lines out later on if we're going to make it into a pen drawing. So putting some of the columns in makes the scale of the building a little bit easier to read. And then the base of the dome, we could put in some of the basic details in that area at this stage too. Again, there seem to be lots of connections how the uprights of the columns in the dome area sort of feed into the ridges on the actual dome, and they all sort of link together. Something that I sort of noticed when I realised, but I didn't see that at first. So we're sort of trying to make smaller and smaller shapes. I think it's always a good idea in a drawing like this to make sure that the lines that you put in at any one stage work with the other lines. So for example, I might think that a line is okay, but if it doesn't work with the rest of the drawing, it's probably a good idea to change it and make it work so that the whole drawing together starts to strengthen rather than individual bits working separately. So if there are any lines that you can straighten, I'm just using it freehand, but you could use a ruler obviously if you wanted to. But if you see any connections or any lines that just need a bit more definition so that they work together, it's a good idea just to change those as you see the need to change them, rather than to notice something that needs changing and to not act upon it. And so at this stage the drawing's starting to come together to some extent, so I'm trying to consider how to put the details in. So what I've been suggesting is you put in the basic shapes. We started off with a really simple basic shape, and then we slowly adding other rectangles and then breaking those down into smaller areas. And now with the details, once they go in with a pencil a little bit, it would be a good idea to try and simplify the details as well and try to understand them in a visually simple way first, rather than complicating the drawing by putting details in which all sort of fight against each other rather than linking together with the basic shapes. So looking at the details and trying to find a way in which to simplify them would be what I'm aiming to do at this stage. And so once you feel confident that the basic structure of the building is more or less okay, and that all the various elements within the building, the various shapes within the building sort of link together, what I would do is use an eraser and try and rub out some of the lines which we no longer need anymore. Sometimes it's a good idea to erase the lines, but other times you can just use the eraser to soften the lines so they're not quite such a hard, dark line, and they're more soft sort of guideline for later on. So the lines which will become pen lines for sure can stay quite firm and dark, and then the other lines which I'm a bit hesitant about, not sure how I'm going to use them, if I use the eraser just to make them a bit fainter, then when I come to use a pen, I have an option about how I can translate the pencil line into a pen line. And now starting to use a black pen to develop this drawing to the next stage. I think that one of the reasons I like to use a pen is because you can't change it, you can't alter it, and therefore the line that you get has a certain sort of honesty to it, because it just is what it is. And if you do a pen line which doesn't quite work or not exactly what you want, it's just a matter of trying to find out how to almost counterbalance it with other lines so that the whole drawing feels okay still. With any pen lines you need to concentrate, but I think with drawing it always involves an enormous amount of concentration, and in a way, although I'm trying to put the drawing into words, it's sort of concentrating on visual things rather than on words. So it's sort of thinking visually rather than thinking with words. And so at this stage in the drawing, it's really important to enable the lines to, in a way, balance with each other, so that the lines, the quality of the line, the actual quality of a curve or a quality of a straight line, they all sort of link together to create the overall effect. And so I hope you find the rest of the video useful for your own drawing. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Circle Line Art School, where I have over 170 other art tutorials. If you'd like some free tutorials, please join Circle Line Art School. Towards the end of this drawing I use a 4B pencil and put in some basic tone. I try and keep the tone, the sort of light and dark of tone, very simple, so I just put in 2 or 3 different tonal values into the drawing, and then I use an eraser and rub out some of the pencil lines. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to YouTube channel, Circle Line Art School, for many more art videos, famous buildings and many other things. Keep drawing and see you next time.